some of their glass art is completely unrelated to keycaps, but every keycap they made, they did like a glass equivalent of it too. So there, you could try to go collect pairings of all of it. And it's still available on their site. I don't know it off the top of my head because it's changed names a few times, but yeah, I'll post it somewhere. I'll post it on Instagram somewhere and you guys can go find it.
If I may backpedal a little bit, Liam, that was an amazing question. A little bit. Keycaps or artisans feels like my first like primary hobby, and I feel like coming to all these meetups and like meeting all these cool people talking about something that other people are passionate about, as am I. I learned so many things in comparing the keycap hobby or keyboard hobby in general to some other hobbies recently. There's this really cool hobby that I just learned about. People like make their own like miniature little houses, like handcrafting each individual component and stuff. And it's like so many hobbies have the exact same mindset as keycaps, where you just want to collect stuff you like and you want to talk to other people that are passionate about it too.
Absolutely. I have collected various things over the years, I feel like, but keyboards and then further down the rabbit hole, artisan keycaps are definitely by proportion the largest investment of my time and money as well. Very, very significantly. I definitely, not that I've stayed along longer than I thought, but I am sometimes surprised that I enjoy it more every day. As cliche as it sounds, like I look forward to casting keycaps. It's so true. A lot, but it's fun, it's enjoyable. I started casting when I moved to Utah from Seattle, so I didn't know a whole lot of people, and it was a very good outlet for me to use up my time in a productive manner, and then also meet a lot of really awesome people in the meantime. And then obviously now I'm traveling around. I'm originally from the Chicagoland area, so it's always a good excuse to go back and visit my family for a keyboard meetup or something along those lines, you know. But it really say keycaps and resin as of the last couple of years has definitely been far and away the biggest share of my collections. It's fascinating.
My art form of choice has always been stories. I'm like really terrible at telling them, but living to experience a really good story is just one of my favorite pastimes. And one of the cool things of growing up, and I don't know if it hits some people quite the way it hits me, but to know that you can experience a story that isn't just told to you, but you can see it moving on a screen, you can see a print that represents something you've been told before, or use a friend's keyboard and there's a figure that may have materialized out of somebody's life events. We have so much media around us that can become part of a story. And so as different kinds of media become available, we're given a more rich tapestry or like complete puzzle of any kind of story that we want. Like, you look at Greek mythology, for example, and you could learn all about the story context in like a classical sense, like you would in a literary class. But if y'all watch like Jim Henson's Storyteller's version of classic Greek myths, it's a whole other experience, and it makes you love all that other stuff so well. So like I've got like VHS tapes of when that was originally on television and stuff, and I keep that, and that's like part of my art collection. I try to collect things that are part of the story, and yeah, that's what means the most. Thank you so much for your question.
Kind of on the storytelling front, made me think of this. So as far as art collecting goes in general, the first art form I collected, and the thing that made me realize I actually liked art, was keycaps. I started collecting at the end of high school, so I mean, it's been a while now. But yeah, at the end of my high school career, I started getting into keycaps and interested in artisans, and then starting to meet people like Binge or talking to people like Kate, and then later on talking to people like Kudos, hearing the stories they told making them, talking to other collectors and hear how they could be totally attached to a keycap for a reason completely opposite what the maker had made it for. Like they whether it's a familiar character, a familiar animal, a colorway that makes them think of a place they loved going as a kid, those stories overall completely, like, they explained art to me as an idea beyond I made a thing that looks like a thing. And so yeah, the majority of my art collection would still be artisan keycaps. I spent way more on keycaps than I ever will on keyboards, but plenty of art beyond that now. I realized that it helped me figure out what I like about art too, because there's such diversity amongst artisan keycaps, so I can figure out theme-wise what I liked, or design details, styles I liked, characters I liked. Did I care about like originally created characters? Did I want stuff that was referencing IP that I liked from other medias, like that type of thing. So keycaps have been really fun for figuring that out.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a keycap out there for everyone, whether it's stylistically you appeal to more cutesy things, or you want something a little bit more of a detailed scope and incredibly complex colorways. There is something out there quite literally for everybody. And I think that's one of the interesting things about this media as it has, or medium as it has spread out, is that, I mean, resident artisans, there's plug and play artisans, but it's all each person's different interpretation of what a keycap could or should be. And
in some way, yeah, it reflects their time in this hobby entirely. It's the looking glass, man.
Absolutely. My favorite thing about I'm sorry, I sound like
No, go for it.
okay, I'm sorry.
Take the lead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, absolutely. Each person sees different things in every keycap, and coming to these meetups to see people's collections where they can tell a story about each individual cap, and basically seeing the canvas that they have turned their collection into. That's super interesting and super cool, and being able to tell these stories constantly over years with different people and stuff, it's very powerful, and it's what forges these relationships that keep us coming back to stuff like this. Sorry, yeah.
As far as weird perspectives on keycaps go, one of my favorite subsets of keycaps that doesn't get produced very often are when people approach keycaps from the perspective of what if it's just an art piece and it doesn't need to be functional. And so I have plenty of keycaps that won't fit in a box, really don't fit on a board unless you were to design a custom keyboard to actually use the keycap on. But I think that's just such a funny idea of pushing the art form beyond actually being functional, where it's like, technically it's still a keycap, but does a keycap actually have to be put on a switch and be actuatable?
All right, hold on. Worm in the ear, guys. Whoever wants to make this, go for it. But artisan keycap, that you put a switch in it and then close around the switch.
Yes. Even better if it's fused shut, so you have no access to the inside permanently.
All right. Yeah, well, welded like tiny screw and nut. You gotta weld the tiny.
Red Loctite, you'll never. But yeah, make giant ridiculous keycaps. Push it beyond, like stop. Think of it as an art form instead of it has to be a keycap.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we and the official sexy chicken. You guys were collecting before you were making, right?
yes.
So did making caps change your opinion or selectivity in terms of which caps you like? Did it change your opinion on which ones you had? Did you think less of them, more of them?
For me personally, I definitely saw my collection gravitate more towards sculpts on blanks as I started to make more keycaps. I think that's changed a little bit. The first cap that I really started collecting was the Darth Vader sculpt by Alpha keycaps, and I really enjoy them, but they are not a sculpted blank. There is an MF Luga that is technically a of like encapsulation, but oddly enough, I'm not as large of a fan of those. So I think that for me reflects a little bit of how my tastes have changed, and then also now I look at colorways that I gravitate towards, or certain characteristics of sculpts that 2 years ago, a year ago even, I might not have entered for that raffle, but now it's rare for me to miss them. So I definitely think that features in caps, especially that I look for, I really like UV reactive things and things that glow. So I tend to now, look for more caps with reaction, and I think that the actual little surprises really go the extra mile for me.
Not to totally disrail or derail you, but as far as I'm aware, he has the highest percentage of UV reactivity and glow in the dark pigmentation used in sale keycaps. I think as far as sale keycaps go, it is 100%. As far as caps in the wild go, it's like 98 plus. Oh,
There's a couple on accident that I don't have things in. Most of them is intended to though, but every once in a while, I don't know, I'll not mix glow in the dark powder well enough, and it's like, oh, maybe I don't advertise that as a feature.
Well, fun fact, like a lot of the fluorescent pigments out there are some of the only ways that you can achieve an actually like bright and saturated color as just a component. We did like a casting experiment thing yesterday where we got a whole bunch of people who had like little to no casting experience, and I just took them through the process I would do every day. Everybody made wonderful keycaps, it was amazing, but I have a fluorescent magenta, and it's used as like it's an industrial magenta pigment that is meant to be on reflective surfaces, so like when light hits it or whatever, it's super high vis, and it's ended up being the only pigment that I've been able to find in that space that lets colors swing a certain direction in hue. And so like from a creative process, knowing nothing about it, but having access to those materials, you probably noticed like some of that, I'm using this material and now I can suddenly get into this color space that doesn't really exist anywhere else, all right?
No, absolutely. And at first it wasn't necessarily intentional. I did just happen to buy a couple of UV reactive pigments at first, but as I started to learn more about what I like to make, it was very easy for me to gravitate towards colors to use those or intentionally try and fit in the ways. Like sometimes I'll throw in like a UV reactive green base and then absolutely bear the green color with it just because I like it when it shines when there's a good black light on it.
So I guess that also to put some of this in English in case, like, in case there might have been a bit of a misunderstanding there that wasn't clear. Because when you use UV reactive pigments, there's obviously like UV around in the world. Those colors, even if there's a low amount of UV, are still fluorescing. So like it does impact the color in every situation, not directly under the UV lights. You can hit saturations and brightnesses and vibrancies that are quite literally impossible without that fluorescing.
There's also additive, kind of nasty, that will help things glow blue under UV light or purplish kind of if it's just in sunlight. So there are some caps that I have that they're clear, but if you leave it out in the sun, it'll turn blue, or you'll start to see more of like those secondary colors.
And the fluorescing would be true too, where it's like if you have blue fluorescing and like a pink pigment, when you bring it out in bright sunlight, it might start to shift more magenta-y. Like you will see that color change kind of happening. It's fun. Yeah. Chemistry and physics.
Another interesting thing for anybody out there, opals are actually highly fluorescent. Yeah, if you ever play with some,
There are some opal. There's a local maker. They do non-resin caps. They do rock caps for me in Utah.
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's a young guy, just makes rock stuff in his shop, but really cool work. He's local, so I had been talking with him. He gave me a couple of opals to mess around with. There's a bunch of different types, like synthetic resin stabilized opals and things that I found much better for me. But yeah, there's rock keycaps out there too. So if for some reason you guys don't like resin, still other things.
Everybody who's made rock keycaps where they're not just putting like mineral powders into resin and casting them, nobody's ever made from a singular piece a rock keycap that's the correct profile.
No, they're all
Somebody figured it out.
rounded on.
I understand how much of a
the
cutting challenge that is, but somebody figured it out at least.
Yeah, he made a keycap, and he told me like pick anyone that you want, because I won like a raffle at the last meetup I was at, and it was the Utah one, yeah. And man, they had an opal one, and he was like pick anyone you want, and I was like, the opal's speaking to me, and he's like, yeah, but that's like $350 worth of opal. Because I asked him too. He was gonna be polite and like not make me feel guilty, and I was like, no, that's way too much. What's this one? And it was a much cheaper material. It's called Jasper. But yeah, like it's gorgeous if it's treated properly. This guy obviously knows his rocks. Yeah, he's got a heart on for this stuff.
Big rocks.
You didn't have anything else?
Yeah, we was just setting up that joke for the time.
I was sitting on my hands.
Hello, Mr. Wheat, Mr. Binge, Mr. JQ, Mr. Chicken. My name's Alex, nice to meet you. What do I call it that? So, you guys kind of alluded into it earlier, but, this is a panel comprised of people who have been in the hobby, more recently and way back when it kind of, started, or was more like, we're just doing this in our garage type thing.
I was in black and white.
Exactly. You were there when they built the pyramids. You showed up. So, whether you've made it or you've come across it while collecting, what keycap do you feel most encapsulate your time in the hobby thus far?
I'm gonna be such a boss. The flux capacitor. Okay, so Plaque, I extol him, and I'm like, man, I really love what he did for artisans, and that he took a leap of faith and brought something handmade into such, obviously we're working with technology, but back then there was a lot of upcycling in the community. We could take old keyboards, the control, something didn't work, or maybe the controller, it was like a slave unit to something that had a master controller inside of an old computer that's way too outdated. But we'd upcycle them because the core value of them is that they were serviceable keyboards. They're so much better than the really crappy Dells or Logitechs that you could fumble around with at the time. But he made this keycap, uses 3 little tritium vials in it, and he makes a perfect replica of the little flux capacitor that would be in Back to the Future. And looking back on it, that was such a crazy multimedia experience. When I started with resin, I was like, I gotta learn all about resin. It's gotta be all about resin. Resin was the key to this, the resin will be the end of this. And after I was really interested, he came out with this flux capacitor, and that was the first real multimedia key. He has little wires that he bent in and encapsulated in this space. He's got the tritium vials, and then he did such really cool things with color and space in that cap. And then the theme of time travel, and then being here after, God, it's been more than 10 years.
That one raffle was 2016, wasn't it? Or was it 2015 even?
It was 2015. So yeah, that was 10 years, but the first time I experienced a clack was in 2010. So there's 15 years, and then I started 3 years prior to that. So 18 years is the time I've been in this, and it's shocking being in the future, where my brain is still in the past, where man, I really like keyboards because at some point somebody pulled this out of a dumpster and made it really cool, and then I'm wait, none of that happens anymore. And I feel like Doc a little bit.
On the theme of time travel too, because it was a time travel themed keycap, the way Clack decided who they went to is 5 were made, and he posted in a thread to open it up, and it was a raffle in the sense that anyone could enter, but the 5 oldest accounts that posted in the thread with, if there was a tiebreaker necessary, it would have been post count, but that didn't come up. So the 5 oldest accounts that posted in the thread got the invoices. And so like, in a sense, like you had to time travel to get the key cap because you had to have made your account as far, but it doesn't matter how active you have been like between now and then, you just needed to have made the account way back then. And so it was kind of fun.
What was the exact phrasing in your question, Alex?
The key cap thing you have that, you feel encapsulates your time in the hobby thus far?
That's a heartbreaking question, actually, because I think I just traded for a keycap that would have been that, but it's lost. So, yeah.
What was it?
It was a Chi-Town Anatomy. So, that was like the keycap. That was the keyboard meetup that basically got me into collecting artisan keycaps within like the local space. And it really was a beautiful moment for me, I think, to be able to basically get that keycap, just, I don't know, by persevering in the hobby, I would say, and also having the lovely help of real homies in the hobby, like Ayuk, Chan. Thank you, Luke. But I don't know. I don't think that's a real answer, but.
That was a real Yeah.
Thank you.
This is kind of a tough one for me to answer because there's a long list I could go through. But probably the most fun story to tell that we have time to tell is so I have a Knocked Prophecy plaque, which is the purple base with the glow in the dark green pop leaf on the front. I have the toast. I wish I had the ONAT, but the toast is more common. Is what it is. But the toast, I had the cap for 2 or 3 years, and then I met up with a friend, and we were hanging out at a meetup, and I told him the ownership history of the cap, and I told him the story of how I got it, and he went, "Oh, I used to own that cap. You're actually missing the beginning of the ownership history, and it's way more fun than you think it is." And I was like, "Oh, that's really cool. Who owned it before?" He's like, "Well, that's the Knocked Prophecy that Cypho had, and then Bro had before Cypho." And as soon as he said that, what I realized was I now owned the clack leaf that I saw Bro take a picture of that made me want clacks to begin with. I literally owned the cap from the picture that I had seen a few years prior, and then I had owned it for a few years before actually figuring out the full story. I knew it was real, but I hadn't completed the full story on it, and it was just so cool to see the community aspect and just like the small world aspect of like, oh, like that, it's literally that cap. It was so fun to find that one out and put the story together later and just, I don't know, tie everything together like that.
Wow, that's a little better story than mine, unfortunately. But for me, I'm going to talk more about Lugos because they mean a lot to me. That was, like I said, the first sculpt that I really started collecting. But also, took me a long time to collect them all, and in the meantime, I had exchanged a couple here and there, and one of them at the time was the Darth Maul Luga. I've owned 4 or maybe 5 of them here and there, just cycling through. I mean, every cap moves eventually, so just be a little patient here and there.
Forever homes don't exist.
There you go. But that, for me, it comes really full circle because it's not only was that the sculpt that I had worked the hardest to collect, but also ended up moving a couple to fund and buy all of the initial things I used to start casting, and then oddly enough, use that to buy back the once or twice. Obviously, some life events happen here and there, but no, it's just interesting to see how, again, everything comes back around and you meet people in this hobby and it'll pay off.
Kind of on that community aspect, another fun keycap story just to wrap up. I have a Shadow Stalker set from Melt that I won from the original auction, and then a few months later ended up trading it away. And then 3 years after that, one of my friends got the exact set that I had used to own, and then after he had had his time with it and decided he didn't want it anymore, it came back to me. And then I loaned it out to a different friend who had it a few years, and now it's been back with me again for a few months. But I still have not owned it longer than my friend who had it on loan, or actually the person who owned it temporarily in the middle. So it's like, it's come into and out of my possession several times. I intend for it to never leave again, even on loan. But yeah, it's fun how these things float around.
I saw a couple other hands, like, let's just get a couple quick ones. Anybody else have something? Like, come on, I saw some other hands.
Please.
How much do your collections cost?
We don't count.
Okay, no. I got an answer for this.
My average per keycap is shocking.
Well, per
Okay, but we'll multiply by 2,000.
Okay, another question. For the makers, is there any media that interests you guys that maybe in the future or you've recently thought about working with, like outside of keycaps?
Yeah, I saw this really cool video, and I recently pulled it up in my YouTube history, so I really hope it's still there. I definitely added it to my watch list. But this is fascinating stuff for anybody who likes material stuff. Okay, watch later list. There it is. Okay. So this is by a guy named Dan Gelbart. That's Gelbart. Sorry, Gelbart. Dan Gelbart. And it's called Novel High Resolution 3D Printing Method for Metal Sintering. And this guy basically, like, this company wants to sell kilns, like that you can do pottery or other things in, but these are really awesome kilns. They can also be like vacuum, so you can do your kilning in a vacuum, which is cool for some reasons I won't get into. But essentially, it goes through a process where you use powdered metal, wood glue, water, a freezer, a freeze dryer, and then a kiln to sinter an object that you cast in a mold that you could make in a party cup and come out with something that is like a fully finished, beautiful metal object. And I want to do this so bad. The cost of entry is like way beyond where I'm at right now, but like it's fascinating if anybody looks into that.
Sintering is using a laser to 3D print.
Yeah, but this is just high heat sintering. Like the mad. So like the objective here is to freeze metal. Okay, there's a binder, which is this like modified wood glue thing. You freeze it in place with this water and wood glue mixture. You dehydrate it and freeze it in that place, and then you put it in a kiln, and it gets so hot so fast the metal starts bonding before the wood glue, like the acetate binder vaporizes.
Center the whole thing at once instead of in layers, like a normal process.
Sorry, I was gone for too long.
we have to wrap up, but if you would like more of these stories, come talk to Vince downstairs.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be quick then. Still keyboard related and resin, and I guess technically tree related, but I've been working on with one of my local keyboard friends, Electronics. We've been doing a lot of hand-turned resin and wood keycap pullers. There will be 2, I think, available. Well, one wood, one all resin, one for the actual giveaway. But it's, I mean, still very keyboard related, and I don't know, it's a very different medium than how I would approach casting a keycap.
Can I give you a little nugget of maybe?
Yes, please.
I'm kind of wishing. You know how we do paranoid eyes?
Yeah.
Do like double wood paranoid eyes. Like, see if you can get some wood cut in tiny spirals and like have a subsequent.
Can you put slices of wood not to the eye? Keep that stuff in mind.
Like-
That's what I thought.
All right. Thank you all so much.
I was